Good evening. It is September 24th, approximately 6:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this is going to be a tropical update on Tropical Storm Helene. Tropical Storm Helene gained tropical storm status early this morning, and it has slowly been throughout the entirety of the day, been slowly intensifying. Currently located at 19.7 north and 84.7 west, moving along at the west-northwest at about 12 miles per hour. Minimum pressure is at about 995 millibars, and maximum sustained winds are at about 50 miles per hour. There are indications that Tropical Storm Helene is beginning to improve its overall structure. As we can see here earlier today, that Tropical Storm Helene had a low-level center that was somewhat exposed throughout earlier today, but that center has now found its way somewhat under a lot of convection that is beginning to bubble up near the center. That is also co-located with the mid-level circulation. All of these are great indications that Tropical Storm Helene is beginning to intensify and beginning to get itself together, which isn't good because there is a high ceiling for this storm, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, there are also indications that the pressure is beginning to fall off pretty rapidly in the storm. Here is a buoy located near the center of circulation, and we can see that the pressure was held steady for a while, but we can see that pressure is really beginning to tail off, and we're somewhere in the 995 range. That is a great indication that the system is beginning to intensify, and we can see that the wind speeds are also beginning to increase as we get closer toward the storm. Now, I just want to take a zoomed out view of the storm to kind of see the environment around it. We can see that the storm has great outflow, showing that it's pretty much in an area of low shear and also an area where it's allowed to ventilate. This is pretty indicative of a strengthening system, and you notice that this system is a pretty large envelope, pretty much taking up almost the entirety of the Western Caribbean. So we can see that Helene definitely has an opportunity to be a very, very strong system, and current projections show that this system may begin to take on some major hurricane level impacts. And just to show you here, convection around the storm is beginning to bubble up. That is a good indication that pressure is beginning to decrease, allowing for these thunderstorms to really bubble up and reach higher into the atmosphere, allowing a lot of latent heat release, which also drops the pressure. So it's almost a perpetual cycle, allowing the storm to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's basically what the storm is doing now. The storm is pretty much projected to continue its strength toward landfall, attaining hurricane status sometime this time tomorrow. And on Thursday, the National Hurricane Center is beginning to outline the possibility of this storm achieving major hurricane status somewhere in the eastern Gulf. So this storm does bear watching, as it has the potential to be a very, very impactful system. We can already see here that we have hurricane warnings along the portions of the Yucatan Peninsula and hurricane warnings located around the Big Bend area of Florida. So if you're in these areas, I would definitely go ahead and start my hurricane plans. Definitely put them into action, because if you're in Florida, you have only about less than 3 days to go, and if you're in the portions of the Yucatan Peninsula, you're basically somewhat all running out of time. So if you're living in these areas, or if you know anyone in these areas, let people know that, hey, there is a storm coming and it may mean business. Now, where is the storm going? We can see the official track here from the National Hurricane Center has a landfall location somewhere located near the Big Bend area of Florida. And the GFS is also pretty much saying the same thing. And the reasonings for that is we have these areas, this area of high pressure that is located just to the east of the storm, allowing the storm to kind of somewhat travel in this direction. However, located in the southeast portion of the United States is this area of low pressure that begins to cut off, and that low cutting off is going to allow the storm to pivot around this low, slingshotting it basically into the state of Florida. So we're going to pull it back a couple of hours, basically to current time, and we can see here there's an area of high pressure located just to the east of Florida, but this high is going to begin to somewhat move toward the east, allowing this trough to dig down into the southeast, and it's going to cut off. And once that trough gets into this area as a cutoff low, it is going to have influence on Tropical Storm Helene, depending on what area it's located in. And I'm going to play this out for you guys, but you're going to see that it's going to begin to eventually move its way northward, and it's going to allow the storm to then feel the effects of the trough. You see that high pressure is beginning to move off. You can see Helene beginning to make its way into the southern Gulf, and then now it begins to feel the influence of that trough, and it begins to pivot around that trough, allowing for an impact somewhere near the Big Bend of Florida. So it's important that we watch these trends. There is some wiggle room for landfall locations, but the models have pretty much honed in onto the Big Bend area of Florida. There may be some opportunities for maybe some eastward shifts or maybe even some westward shifts, and that's where basically just watching how trends begin to develop and continue on. Same thing on the GFS. Just going to show you really quick how this all evolves. You can see that trough coming down to the south. That high pressure is moving eastward, allowing for a channel to open up for a tropical storm or possibly Hurricane Helene at the time to then make its way into the southern Gulf. It begins to feel that effect of that cutoff low and then pivots right into the state of Florida. So all indications show that this is definitely going to be a Florida storm. It's just basically nailing down the exact landfall location, but all indications basically say that the Big Bend area of Florida will be somewhat of a bullseye. So when can we start to expect some impacts? If you're along the peninsula of Florida, the most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds is somewhere or during the day on Thursday. You may begin to feel some outer bands, especially if you're in portions of the Keys or in South Florida. You may begin to see some rain increase on your Wednesday, but the winds are definitely going to begin to pick up as we get towards our Thursday. And if you're in the Big Bend area, I would definitely have all my preparations done by Thursday because the weather is expected to go downhill throughout the day on Thursday. In addition to the winds, we're also going to have a lot of surge issues. If you're anywhere on the Gulf Coast of the state of Florida, you're going to definitely be under a storm surge warning, and the storm surge can peak to levels between 10 to 15 feet. So if you're in the areas of the Big Bend area, it kind of acts somewhat as a catcher's mitt, and a lot of this water, especially if it's going to center, is going to be somewhere located here. A lot of this water is going to get piled onto these locations here in the Big Bend area. It almost acts as a nice little catcher's mitt. So if you live in these areas, I would definitely avoid any coastal locations, as there is a possibility for some storm surge, some hefty totals when it comes to storm surge in those areas. So the main takeaways in the Keys is basically just being prepared for this storm. Thursday looks like the last day for storm preparations to be done. If you're in the Big Bend area, if you're in portions of southern Florida or in the Keys, you should expect your weather to begin to somewhat go downhill on Wednesday. Some areas in the Caribbean may see excess rainfall, especially in portions of the Yucatan Peninsula. Flooding is definitely a risk and something that you need to be taking seriously. There's danger of life-threatening storm surge along the entire west coast of the Florida Peninsula and the Big Bend. The highest inundation levels are expected along the coast of the Florida Big Bend. Residents in those areas should follow advice given by local officials and evacuate if told to do so. That is basically it when it comes to Tropical Storm Helene. If you have any questions, feel free to leave any comments, but I would definitely look at advice from the National Hurricane Center and your local news authority. Thank you and have a great day.